Good morning, Metalheads Unit. Welcome to a new episode of the Metal Meltdown, and today we're looking at the third studio album from Disillusion, entitled... Holy fuck, I forgot what the goddamn title is. The Liberation, yes. There we go. Just to make it clear, me forgetting this album's name does not indicate the quality or memorability of Liberation. It's simply a result of me having a little bit too much to drink a little too early. This may be the band's third studio album, but it's also their first album in nearly 13 years, with their previous records coming out consecutively in 2004 and 2006. And while I wasn't personally familiar with those records up until very recently, I have to assume that there's got to be some kind of big cult following surrounding this band, because I've actually seen a pretty decent amount of hype surrounding this record. I've gotten various users that regularly watch the Metal Meltdown commenting and inboxing me, asking me about this thing. My Intoxicated Gaming co-host, Heart of Diana, is raving about this record right now, and I've seen some pretty positive reviews from the likes of Angry Metal Guy, among other notable publications. On top of all that, the first week of September is frankly just dry as fuck. There is really not a lot coming out unless y'all really want to hear my thoughts on Sleeping with Sirens, which I really, really don't think you do. I don't think I even want to hear them. So let's talk about this band instead, because obviously they are objectively way cooler and way more interesting. And that's not even because of all the other things I've just talked about. The Liberation, in fact, stands on its own quite nicely as an incredibly solid, intricate, passionate slice of progressive melodic death metal. It's heavily layered, densely produced, articulately performed. You almost get the vibe that these guys actually spent 13 years working on this fucking thing, resulting in a record that has this perfect balance of being icy and blatant and brutal, as well as being quite lush, quite dreamy, quite intelligent. Musically and aesthetically speaking, think Insomnium meets Modern Enslaved meets classic Opeth, and you're pretty much in the right ballpark. Believe it or not, I would personally argue just a dash of Morbid Angel, but we'll address that particular comparison later. First, let's talk about the best thing about this record: the flow of the entire album, the environment that it creates, the way that it balances all of these moods and tones and stories. Dare I say, it is somewhat masterful. It is brilliantly composed and layered and articulately crafted. The album holds your attention and keeps you engaged and keeps you curious, even when songs reach up to about 12 minutes long. And even the, quote, shorter songs on this record are so densely packed. So many great melodies, so many great lyrics, so many great passages, so many great soundscapes. Take, for instance, Wintertide, undeniably the most dynamic piece on the entire record and also my favorite. You're segued into this track via instrumental piece In Waking Hours, which pairs this booming cello and these orchestral bursts with incredibly warm and tender, soft-plucked acoustic guitar riffs. There's a beautiful contrast here established between the warm and rustic notes of the acoustic guitar and the booming, harrowing nature of the orchestral bits and the cello, which reaches an incredible catharsis immediately at the start of Wintertide before rolling into all these different sections, all these different segments with a very classic Norwegian kind of Viking chant and galloping riffs and wild, multifaceted solos. It's beautiful, it's epic, it's bold, it's dynamic, one of the most diverse tracks on the entire thing. There are particular sections in this song that feature this really great galloping guitar alongside these pretty rustic but well-spoken clean vocals, and the way that it comes off, it really does create this beautiful image in your mind of someone trotting on a horse through an icy blizzard, desperately seeking for some kind of salvation. To put it simply, a very natural visual storytelling is established here, and it translates through the rest of the record, mind you, but here in particular, the picture that it painted was so vivid and powerful. I close my eyes now, and I see it so clearly. Another one of my favorite tracks on here, Simmer in the Darkest Sea, a song that initially I actually wasn't a huge fan was. In fact, initially I found it quite repetitive and plodding. And to some extent that is still true, but the beauty of this track, something that I learned upon a further listen, is that repetitiveness actually helps a lot as the track builds and builds on an initially simplistic base until it creates something incredibly large and powerful. And the culminating atmospheric effect is incredible. You can feel the fog and the mist coming off of this thing. The closing track, The Mountain, is very similar, but weirdly plays off like a power ballad written by a bunch of fucking Vikings. Through the first half of the song, it's quite moody and atmospheric, even haunting, dare I say a little spooky in the right circumstances. But it eventually explodes in the vein of a power ballad and complemented by beautiful flourishes of string instruments and more fantastic guitar solos. The guitar work is stunning. And then you get to a track like The Liberation, where I think the band really embraces the more aggressive and abrasive elements of their sound. So much so that the lead singer here even starts to sound a little bit like David Vincent of Voltimus and Morbid Angel. The way he spurts and shouts, it's classic David Vincent, and it's complemented by incredible guitar work that manages to be just as flamboyant and spooky and crushing as everything else on this record all at once, which itself progresses into what feels like almost entirely new song, almost like something off of the early Opeth records. There's no denying Disillusion have crafted some incredible fucking material here. They've taken a lot of great influences and ideas and spices from a lot of the bands that we've talked about and fuse them in a way that feels entirely new and unique and characteristic of Disillusion. With the exception of those David Vincent vocals. That seems a bit obvious in my personal opinion. But that being said, if you're gonna steal, you may as well steal from one of the best fucking death metal frontmen of all time. So fuck it. Ultimately, the only issue I have with this record would be some of the clean vocals from the band's mastermind, Andy Schmidt. I like the European Nordic accent that he adds to these clean vocals, and I like that he uses a lot of clean vocals in this. And I like the contrast that he uses when he introduces the more extreme vocals as well. But vocals being well utilized and vocals actually being good on a technical level, not the same thing. And on a technical level, some of the cleans on here are really sloppy. Sometimes even jarring and awkward. He had trouble hitting certain notes in a lot of melodies across all the songs. And when this happened, it really pulled me out of the experience, which is a real shame because the album tries so hard to pull you into this experience and most of the time fucking succeeds. I don't know what Andy was doing in the last 13 years that prevented this album from coming out sooner, but, and sorry if this sounds a bit mean, he sure as hell wasn't attending singing lessons. This does prevent me from giving this the 4.5 to 5 that I really want to give it, but I will happily settle on the most enthusiastic 4 out of 5 that I could possibly muster without crossing over into that 0.5 territory. It's powerful, it's beautiful, it's lush, it's dramatic, it's multifaceted, it's diverse, it's well written, well composed, incredibly well produced. Sure, there are some hiccups and some bumps in the road for me in particular, but I'm sure someone would argue that it adds a bit of authenticity to the whole thing, and I suppose in that sense you're not incorrect, so fuck it. Highly recommend this to anyone who's a fan of any of the other bands we've talked about here, from Insomnium to Enslaved to Opeth. Highly recommend this to anyone who's looking for something a little bit more intelligent and dramatic within modern death metal. I don't know enough about Disillusion to say if this compares to the older records, but that being said, if those older records are even half as good as this, I will definitely have to spend a lot more time with them. And right now, I'm just hoping it doesn't take another 13 years to hear more Disillusion, because I want to hear more Disillusion. I want it, goddammit. With maybe some stronger cleans. Just saying. I want it, though! Despite my bitching, I want it! 4 out of 5, a seriously fucking great record. If you love modern death metal, if you love melodic death metal, if you love prog metal, it's something you need to get a hold of real fucking quick. And that is it! For the Metal Meltdown, I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.